Good morning, Dan. My name's Richard Denton. I'm managing partner and head of private client at OGR Stock Denton Solicitors in North London. Thank you very much for inviting me on the show this morning.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So first of all, can you just tell me about the rise in cost of probate fees today and what it means for people?
Absolutely. I think, Dan, it's fair to say that this rise has been a long time in the coming. And in some respects, I know there's been a bit of an outcry about the rise, which in percentage terms is quite high. And I'll explain the way in which the rise has happened because there are two different aspects to it. But I think from my perspective, the rise was always coming and it's relatively modest to what was previously being proposed. So what we've got is we had a system whereby if you engaged with a professional to deal with the application on your behalf, the fee was £155, whereas if you were doing a in-person application, the fee was previously £215. We now have a flat rate that has gone to £273, irrespective of which way you go. And the idea is that that is intended to cover the cost of providing the service. Now, we have on two previous occasions been expecting far more significant rises. Now, in particular, I think the worst hit would have been the biggest estates, and therefore it's fair to say that they would have been best able to deal with it. But we were looking at possible fees in some cases of £20,000. And I know at the time, as many of my colleagues in other firms were, we were extremely busy trying to rush estates through in order to take advantage of the fees before they had those significant increases. So I think in some respects, as I say, I'm a bit relieved that the fees going up to £273 rather than the many thousands that it could have done. I think in real terms, my personal view is it's not going to have such a significant change because remember, in all of these cases, there are beneficiaries inheriting under estates. So if the fee's gone up by circa 50 odd pounds, and that affects a number of beneficiaries on their inheritance, because of course it's the estate that pays for that, it shouldn't have a significant bearing. And I think often people lose sight of the fact that perhaps investing money in professional fees could save them money, and B, that doing it themselves can often be a false economy, as I say, as a corollary to what I've just said. So I think personally the fee is a bit of a red herring, and as I say, it's there to try and help the service, which has struggled over the last 18 months, and hopefully it may allow for the service to improve.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you don't mind, do you mind telling me what the benefits of using solicitors are in these matters and almost why solicitors over, say, accountants if this is about money?
Okay, so I think there are a few things that I will say in response to that question, Dan, and that is as follows. I think first and foremost, I think whichever professional you go to, I think it's important to ensure that they're a specialist in this area. There are a lot of firms that purport or suggest that they deal with administrations of estate, and possibly up to a certain level, they may be able to adequately deal with that. But we often find that there can be a lot of complexities in dealing with an administration of an estate, particularly where inheritance tax is going to be an issue. And I think having a professional to advise you on the way through those pitfalls can be worth its weight in gold. We've often taken over estates, particularly where it became contentious, and noticed that a firm that didn't have the requisite expertise has claimed allowances where you're not entitled to claim allowances, or worse still, failed to claim allowances where you were entitled to. And the client's never going to know, as a result of that the amount of tax that they are paying is significantly higher than it would have been had they've taken professional advice in the first place. Interestingly, with your question over accountants or solicitors, I think there are a couple of things I would say about that. First of all, probate used to be a protected area exclusive to solicitors. That opened up a number of years ago. Mainly, I've seen, certainly the firms that we deal with, the accountancy firm we deal with, do this generally to low level. And we obtain a lot of our referral work from accountants who maybe provide the service up to a certain level, but aren't comfortable with doing it when it gets past that level. And we often engage with the accountants actually in dealing with the administration in the sense of we will always allow them to deal with the income tax affairs of the deceased as they did during their lifetime. We often involve them in dealing with the estate accounts that are drawn up so beneficiaries are aware of exactly how the estate has come to where it's come and how it's going to be distributed. But there are a lot of other services that, as solicitors, only we can still provide, whereas the accountants can't. So, for example, we will often advise on deeds of variation when dealing with the administration of an estate. And effectively, in brief, what that is, it's a mechanism whereby a will, if there's a will, or an intestacy where there is no will, can be restructured in a different format to what the will or the intestacy would normally provide. And that's often done for tax planning reasons for the individual beneficiary. It might be done for asset protection reasons. It could be done just because there's a tax advantage to be had over what the will currently provides. That is still a provision that only a solicitor can give because it's a protected service. In addition to that, you often get beneficiaries who for the first time are inheriting what could be for them significant sums of money. They've never considered perhaps wills. We know a lot of the country don't have wills. They haven't considered powers of attorney to allow for someone else to assist if something were to happen to them. And also, they haven't even considered their own inheritance tax position, and suddenly they've inherited a lot of money. All of those provisions are things that we as a firm would be advising our clients on as part of dealing with the administration of the estate, so that they're aware that these other activities are important. And I think the final thing I would say is that there are other areas such as property. Every estate's going to have a property that needs transferring or selling. We work very closely with our property team to ensure that is done in the most tax efficient manner. And unfortunately, we're living in an ever more contentious world. And again, one of the big areas of practice that we offer is contentious probate. And I work very closely with my colleagues in that team to ensure that, A, from a tax structuring point of view, we get the best outcome, but we will also look to advise and ensure that we can mitigate a lot of the pain that tends to come out of litigation. And we're big advocates of mediation. So they're all extra services that we would provide as a solicitor's firm.
The next thing I'd just like to just ask you, do you mind sort of just telling me a bit more about the actual process of probate, and I guess as well what the current wait times are with that?
Absolutely. So it is a process that you go through, and effectively, where you have assets that need probate, the reason you need a probate is because that's going to give comfort to the asset holder that you are the right person to deal with the transfer or sale of that asset. All the probate is, grant of representation, if we want to use a generic term, is a court-sealed document that is going to confirm that where there's a will, the executors named of that will are the people entitled to deal with the administration and therefore the transfer of the assets, or where it's an intestacy, that the people who are entitled to take out that grant of representation are the right people. As I say, that document is then used to enable the asset holder, be it the land registry, be it shares, etc., to be able to release those assets. In order to get that grant of representation, there are really a couple of stages you need to go through. You'd need to value the assets and liabilities at the date that the person has passed away. That information is then returned, in some cases, directly to the revenue on an inheritance tax form. In other cases, it can be sent directly to the probate, and that's simply going to depend on the size and complexity of the estate. Once that form has been completed, you can then do what's called a legal statement and make the application to the probate office. Now, you mentioned timescales, and I think part of the frustration people have with the fee increase is that we've seen, certainly over the last 2 years, significant increases in timescales. It used to be that we would get a probate back unless there were complications with it within a couple of weeks. We're seeing anything now up to 20 weeks in dealing with these, and it has been worse previously. I'm hopeful that we are coming through that, and times are going to start reducing again. And indeed, in certain smaller estates, we have seen reductions in that wait time, and there doesn't seem to be much rhyme or reason, given that they claim that it's done in order. But there we go. As we see, the world has become a mad place, and very challenging for people to get this through.
Yeah, I don't think there's many things that don't have sort of, double, triple waiting times these days, sadly. But yeah, like you said, hopefully we're coming out the end of it now, and it should get back to normal. So for our listeners who might be listening to this and thinking, they've got probate to deal with and stuff like that, can you tell me a little bit more about who OGR Stock Denton are and what they can do to sort of help in these cases?
Okay, so OGR Stock Denton are a full service law firm. That basically means that we can handle pretty much any issue that a client may face. In particular, we're talking about probate today. As I say, we have a probate department. We're made up of 7 individuals that specialize in dealing with administrations of estates, wills, and inheritance tax planning, as well as other areas such as powers of attorney and court of protection. So that's certainly an area we could help with. We, as I mentioned earlier, work very closely with our contentious probate team, where unfortunately there is a challenge to an estate, and we've had some great success in dealing with that in a very efficient manner. And of course, we have a property department. And the other area we didn't really touch on is that, unfortunately, as I said earlier, things become more contentious, and suddenly someone coming into a lot of money, if they're in a relationship that's difficult, you may need advice in terms of how to manage that experience and what you might be able to do to protect your newfound wealth. And again, we work very closely with our family department in ensuring that nuptial agreements or even cohabitation agreements where people live together can be put in place. So we are really genuinely trying to, as a bunch of commercial lawyers, give practical, solid advice to our clients so that they get value for the money that they spend on receiving that advice and get a good outcome that's going to ultimately protect them.
Yeah, brilliant. So where can our listeners go to find out more information?
We have a good website that has information on it, OGR Stock Denton. If they Google that, it's going to come up. If an individual wanted to contact me directly, again, Google me, Richard Denton at OGR Stock Denton, and I would be more than happy to answer any queries or any questions they've got, give them an indication of what the process is and how much it might cost them, and where, in particular, we might be able to add value to what it is that they need to achieve.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Richard. That's all I have to ask. I mean, if there's anything you'd like to add on, then please do. But that's everything I've got.
No, I think you've asked some very sensible questions. Hopefully, it's given listeners an insight into the process and why they may be best advised to take professional advice, and possibly why a solicitor might be the best place to turn for that professional advice. As I say, sometimes you have people who only think about the cost of doing this, and they lose sight of the effect of the benefit that might bring to them. As I say, we've had lots of situations that we've taken on where the fee that they've spent with us has been more than made up for by the cost savings just by knowing what it is you can and can't do when preparing the forms. So very happy to help any listeners who may want some advice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you very much, Richard. I really
Thank you for your
appreciate
time,
it.
Dan.
Cheers.